everyone, it's Daphne from Scrap and Create, and I'm back to work on another mini album. And based on everyone's responses to the last video, I'm going to be doing a larger scale mini album. It's going to be 8 by 10. The outside dimensions will be 8.5 by 10.5. The inside pocket pages will be 8 by 10. And I'm going to be working with the Princess Collection, which is the latest release from Graphic 45. Okay, page 1, we're going to need 2 flaps. They're going to be a left hand and a right hand flap, and they're going to be installed on the top half of page 1. The bottom half is going to be the pop flip mechanism that I've done before, and that actually gets installed after we mat this page, so we won't be doing that right now. We'll do that in the next video. So you'll need 2 of these. These are 4 inches by 8 inches, and then you're going to score a 1/2 inch on either end. And again, they're going to get installed to the left and to the right and flush with the top of page 1. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my book sideways so I can see the very edge of my pocket page. And I'm going to use a contrast sheet. So this is the top and this is the outside. That's toward the spine. I'm going to apply my first flap right flush with the corner of page 1. Okay, and before I lay down the rest of my score tape, I'm just making sure it's all lined up with the top of the page. Okay, great, that's in. Now I'm going to rotate it around and put in the second flap, which goes just like this. Get my score tape off. And page 1 is a mirror of page 8. So we'll do this again at page 8. And then these 2 flaps, pretty much that's all we're going to do for page 1. Like I said, until... So I'm just trying to make sure that I get it close to the edge of the page, but steer clear of the hinge itself. Okay, I'm making sure it's flush to the top of the page before I lay down my score tape. And it is. Okay, that is it. So I'll put my contrast sheet under here so you can see what I'm doing. So we've got a flap that opens to the left and a flap that opens to the right. Okay, when it's closed, it's going to be in this orientation so that the top flap is closing away from the spine. That helps with any possible interference. And then I'm going to add a second magnet. So I've got one here. And do I have it in the right spot? I think I'll do this. There we go. So I'm going to lay down a little bit of sticky tape to hold that second magnet in place. Okay, I'm going to close my flap. I'm going to make sure it's all tight and even. Press down, and then there we go. Okay, so now my magnets are in place for when I finish the album. Actually, it's going to close that way because I want to close away from, and because I want to do that, I'm going to change. Actually, I'm going to change where I put my magnets. I'm going to put it on this end. So here, and that's because I want to close away from the spine. Take that extra tape off. It's going to close like that. And now my tape is on the wrong side, so bear with me. Open that, find the mate, and then get another piece of tape. Okay, closing my flap, pressing down, and then there's my magnet. And then I've got my tape over it to kind of soften the edges once I go back and put my designer paper in. So that is the end of page 1. Now we're off to page 2. Okay, now we're going to go on to page 2. Page 2. So on page 2, we've got quite a few things going on. And as I had mentioned earlier in the video, there's actually 4 designer pages, and they're going to be used twice throughout the album. So page 1 will be page 1 and 8. Page 2 is going to be 2 and 7. So we'll be working on page 2, which is, again, also page 7. So we're going to start with a large flap. It's going to be attached to the left side of the paper, or left side of the pocket page. It is 8, and let me double check my measurements. Yes, 8 by 10. 8 by 10, and we are scored at the 1/2 inch mark on the 8-inch side. So when you're finished, you've got a 7.5 by 10. That's going to be attached to the left side of the pocket page. So I'm going to sit down and go ahead and do that. This is a fun page. There's a lot of activity on this particular page, which I like. So I'm just lining up my corners as usual. Trying to get flush to the edge of the pocket page on the left hand side. Okay, so we're down. So that is the first part of page 2. And then the next part is we're going to have a flap at the top. And then these 2 flaps, which go left and right, are going to attach to the top flap. So I'm going to go ahead and put this down first. And this is 7.5 by 7.5. So it's 7.5 by 7.5. And then along one of the sides, you're going to score at 1/2 inch. Okay. And this is being applied directly to the flap that we just added. So it's going to go right on top. I'm going to turn it over so I can see my edges. And I want to make sure that I've got a nice flush side here. So I'm going to put this corner down first and then carry it across the page, making sure that everything is flush. And this looks good. I'm going to press it down, turn it right side up. This is the up side. So now we have 1 flap and then a large flap. Okay, and the next thing is we've got a left and a right hand flap, and they're going to be attached to this top flap. So we'll have a left and a right, just like that. Okay, and these measure, I'm double checking, 8 by 5.5. So this is 5.5 by 8. You're going to score a 1/2 inch, and you're going to need 2 of those. And I'm going to apply these toward the bottom of the top flap. So instead of having it up at the top, it's going to be applied to the very bottom. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and apply the right hand side first. And so I'm looking to get a tight corner and have it go flush across the edge here. Okay, there's 1. And now 2, and I'm going to dry fit it because I might need to trim it a little so that it will close, because one of these needs to be a little bit shorter than the other in order for it to close flush. And it looks like I just need to take a tiny bit off this, so I'm going to do that right now, and I'm just going to use a ruler and a straight edge. And I'm going to just take a tiny bit off, and I'm eyeballing it, just enough to make sure that the flap will close flatly. Okay, I'm going to check it one more time. Lay this down. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to tell you, one of the things that I try to do when I'm designing a page is if I'm going to have a flap that opens, I want it to open on the outside of the book. And the reason I want that is because when you close the book, there's less likelihood of the flap catching the next page. So it's something to keep in mind when you're designing your own albums. And it looks like I got enough off, so I'm going to turn it sideways, take the tape off, and go ahead and lay this down. Okay. And again, this is 5.5 by 8, score 1/2 inch along the 8-inch side. There, and that looks nice. So that is down, and then our last piece is, I don't have it marked, but it's a pocket, and it's actually going to get attached to this large flap. And the pocket measures, let's see, 3.5 by 8.5. So it's 3.5 by 8.5, and then you're going to score along 3 sides. And then I just mitered the corners, and I don't know why I don't have tape on it, but I don't. So I will, in the interest of time, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on this one. And I actually kind of like glue on pockets anyway. This is actually going to get attached to the top flap as well. And as you can see, it doesn't take very much glue, and I'm using my art glitter glue as usual, which is available in our shop at www.scrapandcreate.com. And we carry the 2, the 4, and the 8 ounce. And we also carry these tips that I use, which I love. Because the other ones, I always had trouble finding or not losing my my pin to keep it from clogging. All right, just trying to get my corners down. Actually, not quite at the bottom. Coming across, tucking everything in. There we go. Now we've got a nice pocket. And the pocket is pretty much right at the very edge of the flap. So you can do 2 things. One, you can either put something inside, lift the flap and put something inside, or I think I left it short enough that you can also do put something in this way. And this is what I'm planning on doing. I'm planning on putting something in on top to actually hold the flaps in place instead of using magnets for a change. Okay, so that is in, and that is the end of page 2. Okay, so you guys can see how that works. So we've got a left and a right, a top to bottom, and then a large left flap, and then lastly we've got this little pocket. So that is page 2, but that will also be page 7. Okay. Okay, now on to page 3. Okay, page 3 is pretty simple. We've got a top flap, an extended flap, and a pocket. So we're going to start with the top flap, and that measures 8 by 5 3/4, 8 by 5 3/4, and then we're going to score a 1/2 inch along the 5 3/4 side. And because this actually goes into and meets the spine, I've decided to do something a little bit different on this book. I'm going to trim this down a 1/2 inch. So actually it's going to be 5 3/4 by 7.5. I found that with the larger albums, when I'm going to close, there's some interference here at the spine. So just like I did on this side, I'm going to give myself a 1/2 inch on the other side. And so I'm going to trim that off right now. And I'm using this new trimmer from Martha Stewart, which I picked up for a song. And I have to say, I really like it. As far as having a portable, I really like my Caterpillar, but it's really not easy to move it around, especially when I'm doing a video. And this has turned out to be a real dream. I think Martha Stewart had something like this before, and this is a new release of it, and it seems to have worked out some of the bugs. Anyways, I really like it. Pick it up at Michael's. Is that right? Michael's or Joann's? Either one. It's $19.99 retail, but you can pick it up with a coupon, and it's really, like I said, it's a great deal. So now I've got this 1/2 inch space between the spine, the edge of the paper, and the gusset. And that way, when I'm opening and closing, I don't have to worry about any interference and catching the corner of this, which I had seen in some of my other albums, which is causing me to make this change. And for some reason, it's the bigger ones where it seems to be a problem. I don't think I've had that problem. My apologies for shaking the camera. I don't think I've had that problem with my 8x8s. Seems to be when I get to a bigger format. Oops, I grabbed before I was ready. That's not straight. All right. So we are winding down here in San Diego, the end of our Thanksgiving week. And we had kind of a busy week. We actually went out of town to visit some family in Texas, and that was fun, but it's always good to be home. All right, so that's in, and that looks good. So that's the top flap. So I trimmed this 1/2 inch, like I said, so it's 7.5 by 5 3/4. You're going to score a 1/2 inch at the 5 3/4 side. And this is an extension of that flap, so when we're done, it'll fold up and then fold up. And I think on the larger format, that just makes the book a little easier to handle instead of having a 10-inch flap. But because I trimmed this down a 1/2 inch, I'm going to do the same thing on here. So it will be 5, it's a little bit smaller than this one. It'll be 5 by 8, or 5, excuse me, by 7.5. 5 by 7.5. And what else do I want to say? And then you're going to score a 1/2 inch along the 5-inch side. Score a 1/2 inch along the 5-inch side. And we're just going to attach this flap to the bottom of this. So I'm going to go ahead and take my tape off. And I'm going to line it up with this flap and also the edge of the paper, and hopefully when I should dry fit it first. When I dry fit it, everything will fit and nothing will be off the edge. And it looks like I've got a nice straight line down here, and it's marrying up with the edge of the pocket page beautifully. So it looks great. One of the ways to make sure that happens is when you're trimming these 2 pages down lengthwise, trim them, stack them and trim them together, and then you know you'll have shared edges, and it should go in nice and straight. So all I'm doing is taking this corner, the corner of the flap, and attaching it to the corner of this. Okay. And if you are familiar with my videos, you've seen the same flap design in Christmas Magic, and I think it's actually, if I'm not mistaken, on page 1. And I'm just laying this down carefully because of the size of the album. There's a little bit of bow across the page right now, so I just want to make sure I'm getting it down nice and straight, and I am. And there we go. So it's going to look like this. And then the last piece is this pocket, which is going to go on the inside. And I designed the pocket to go the full length of the page because these were going to go the full length of the page, but now I'm rethinking that. Now I'm thinking I probably want to scale my pocket down a 1/2 inch, just like I did these flaps. And I'm going to do that, so give me a minute. I'm going to go away and make my new pocket, and then we'll lay that down. I'm back. I took the original pocket and just trimmed it down a 1/2 inch, and then moved my score line over a 1/2 inch, and now it's ready to be put down. And that will bring us to the end of page 3. Okay, I'm just tucking everything over. And there we go. Preparing my pocket. Okay, so I'm going to line it with the outside edge of the pocket, away from the spine, toward the edge of the page. Pulling it nice and taut. Get my fingers out, and there we are. So that is down. So we're going to go ahead and place a magnet here because I'll want that to help me keep the page closed. And you just want to place it kind of in the middle of the pocket. And the reason is you just want to stay away from any of the edges where it might be exposed after you put your mat in. So I want to make sure it's up high enough on this page as well. And it may not be. I may need to move that up. We shall see. Now's the time to find out, though. Make sure it is closing straight, and it is. Everything looks beautiful. Yeah, I think I want to move that in a little. I should have placed the top one first. So let me get some piece of tape. I'll move it more toward the middle, but not too far. Otherwise, it's going to be at the top of. That really went in good. I'm using my pick tool to lift it. I've got the sticky on the wrong side. Yeah, that's fine. That is fine. There we go. I'm going to put some tape over both pieces, or both magnets. And then when it's time to put down, oh, I already did one. Time to put down our mats. It'll help smooth the edge of the magnet so it's not so harsh against the paper. Okay, that is the end of page 3. Now we're on to page 4. Okay, now we're ready for page 4. Page 4 is going to be the same as page 5. Like I said, there's 4 designs, and we use each design 2 times. So 4 and 5 are going to be the same. They'll be duplicates, only they're going to be mirrors of each other. So everything on page 4 is going to get, or the beginning of it's going to be attached to the left-hand side, and then on page 5 we're going to attach it to the right-hand side. So when you open everything up, it really expands, and I chose page 4 and 5, the middle section, to do that feature on. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. There are several flaps. There are 2 left-handed flaps, and then there's a pocket that goes on top of the top flap, and then inside we're going to have some flaps that close, or right-handed flaps that'll open up. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start with the large flap. And this is 7 by 10, 7 by 10. Let me double check my measurements. Yes. So we're going to score a 1/2 inch along the 7-inch side, and that is going to get applied to the very edge of the pocket page. And I'm dry fitting it right now to make sure that it's not going to hang off and that it's going to marry up perfectly, and it looks like it does. So I'm going to go ahead and take my tape off and lay this piece down. And again, this is the large flap attached to the left-hand side of page 4. And it is 7 by 10. I'm going to score a 1/2 inch along the 7-inch side. And let me get this down, and then I'm going to actually stand up So you're gonna have to look at the top of my head and see if I can't get it to go. I'm gonna switch it so I can see all the edges, or yeah, 3 out of the 4 edges. Get that right to the edge. Beautiful. Okay, so that is in. And all of these, when I go back to double check everything before I lay down my papers, I'm going to verify that all the edges are nice and crisp and burnish my tape. If there's any chance of removing anything, I don't want to press my tape down too hard, or at least not with a bone folder. Okay, so the next flap is also going to attach to the left-hand side, and it is going to go right on top of the top flap. So when you're finished, you'll have flap 1 and flap 2. And this is, double check my measurements, 5 by 10. 5 by 10, and you're going to score 1/2 inch along the 5-inch side. Okay, again, 5 by 10, score 1/2 inch. We're going to put it right on top of the last flap. And that didn't look like I got right on the corner, so I'm going to switch it around a little bit. And I'm also going to find my contrast sheet, which really helps me. I try to always have one handy. Especially when I'm working on black. Okay, here we go. Now that is in, looks good. And then the next piece is going to be a pocket that gets applied directly to the top of the top flap. And this measures 5.5 by 6 1/8, 5.5 by 6 1/8. And those measurements come from, I'm actually gonna use a piece of ephemera here. So when I was designing the book, I always like to take into consideration the ephemera that I'm gonna be using. So I usually take the ephemera packs apart and check the sizes of everything. And then I want to design at least some of my flaps, features, or pockets around the exact size of the ephemera. And I'm pretty consistent with that. I do that in almost all my designs, at least if it's a graphic album, because they always have lots of goodies, lots of extras that go with their collections. It's not just the 12 by 12 paper. As much as I love Stamperia, unfortunately, they don't have any of the extras, or rarely. Okay, now this is just going to get applied directly to this flap, and it should be flush on both edges. It's just a nice little pocket that's gonna go top down. So I'm lining up my corners, but I'm stuck, but it's stuck to me. And I'm gonna do this again. I can see what I'm doing, and you can too. There must be some static in the air every time my paper's going down before I'm ready for it. There we go, beautiful. Okay, so that is a nice deep pocket that we'll put something in later. So we've got a pocket, a flap, and a flap. And now the last feature is going to be these 2 flaps that are going to be adhered toward the spine. And so I want to go back and talk about something real quick. So in this feature, in these 2 features, you can note that I stayed clear of the spine, and I actually gave myself a 1/2 inch buffer. And that's because these open away from the spine, up and down or away from the spine. But if your hinge is actually on the spine, you don't have to worry about the interference. So in this particular case, I'm actually going to put these flaps directly next to the spine, at the very edge of the pocket page. So just so you know, that's the thought process that's going on here. If the hinge is toward the spine, you don't have to really worry about interference. But if you've got any edge that is not a hinge toward the spine, you might want to consider giving yourself a 1/2 inch. So just a design tip. It's one of those things that the more you do the books and the more you move the flaps, you become aware of some of those things. So I can't remember how I designed this, but I think, yeah. So yeah, that's what it looks like. So I think I designed it so that these flaps actually go flush with the edge of the page, and then it leaves a 1/2 inch strip in the middle. So with that, let me find my pick tool. Here it is. I'm gonna go ahead and lay these down. And these are, I don't think I told you, 4 3/4 by 8. 4 3/4 by 8, and you're gonna score a 1/2 inch along the 4 3/4 side. No, I'm sorry, a 1/2 inch along the 8 inch side. So when you're finished, you've got a 7.5 by 4 3/4. Okay, that's one. And this is the last one, and I'm actually going to go ahead and flip my book around so I'm not reaching over. It's toward me, and I can better see this edge. Okay, I'm laying down one corner, and then I'm just making sure that it's flush with the edge of the page. It is. I'm gonna go across and lay that down. Okay, so here we are. Let's walk through that. Okay, so pocket, flap, flap, and then 2 right-hand flaps, and that is page 4, and it is also page 5. So we're going to do the same thing, only we're going to flip it so that everything opens to the right, and this all opens to the left. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. I've got everything pre-cut. I'm ready to go, I think. Again, 7, let me double check my measurements. Yes, 7 by 10, 7 by 10. Along the 7 inch side, score a 1/2 inch. And turn that sideways so I can see the edges. And I'm going to use my contrast paper. There we go. Okay, that is it. And then the next piece is the flap that goes right on top. Same side. And this is 5 by 10, 5 by 10. By 10. All right, how's that looking? It's looking pretty good. It's tough when you're stacking that many, but it looks pretty good. Okay, so the next piece is the pocket that goes right on top here. Just like this. So it's going to be flush with the edge of the pocket page, as well as flush with the edge of this flap. Okay. I'll take my tape off, and I ran glue along the bottom of this particular pocket. It's really up to you. You could, if you wanted, you could score 3 out of the 4 sides. So this piece is 5.5 by 6 1/8, 5.5 by 6 1/8, and you're going to score 1/2 inch on 2 sides, and you're going to do that along the 5.5 inch sides. So 5.5, you're going to score at 1/2 inch. And 4.5 inches, is that right? A 1/2 inch, no, a 1/2 inch and 5. 1/2 inch and then 5. Oops, I forgot to put glue on the bottom, or I almost forgot. Nothing would stay in my pocket if I did that. Okay. Okay, that is in. And then these two pieces are going to go this way. And I'm going to actually trim these down to a 1/2 inch. So these are going to be 4 3/4 by 8. 4 3/4 by 8. And that's just because I don't want any interference with the hinge. 7 1/2 actually. There we go. And then these are going to go toward the hinge and close across the middle. Okay, so I'm just dry fitting these really quickly. Okay, 4 3/4 by 8. 4 3/4 by 8. You're going to score 1/2 inch. You're going to do that 2 times. You're going to score 1/2 inch along the 8 inch side. And then you're getting it as close to the spine without going into the spine as possible. Just want to make sure it's actually didn't go down straight. So I'm lifting it and then want it to be flush with the bottom. There we go. Okay, one more. One more. And, oh, you guys are in for a treat. So this is the new collection, the Princess, and I know I have a few fans out there, and thank you so much for watching and tuning in. But I also want to let you know that Christine is doing one with the same paper collection too. So you're going to have 2 designers giving you 2 fresh pieces of inspiration on this brand new collection. So we're kind of excited about that. And I don't have any idea what she's doing, except I know she's not doing an 8 by 10. That's the only thing I know. So we're trying to keep our projects secret from each other to see how they turn out. I'm kind of excited to see hers. We just got the paper off to her, and she's over in North Carolina on Wednesday. So she's usually pretty fast on getting stuff designed and out for us. So I'm very excited to see what she does. Okay, these 2 are in, and I'm looking at it, and I'm not very happy with this because this page looks so much longer than this one. So I think I'm going to go back in with a straight edge and straighten this up a little bit and make it, and you'll see what I mean when I pick these 2 pieces up, make it a straight line. That'll bother me once the designer paper is in, especially if it's something light underneath. So I will take a cut mat and go back in with my X-Acto knife and straighten that up. But for now, I'm happy with the edges this way. So this is a fairly easy fix, but I'll do that offline, so you guys don't have to sit through it. And we have just finished page 5, page 4 and page 5. So there's a lot going on in these 2 pages, as you can see, and they're gonna need something to hold them down. So let's focus on getting some magnets in to hold these 2 pages together. So I'm thinking that I want a magnet on this page. So let's go ahead and get a piece of tape ready. I'm gonna figure out what I'm doing on one side and then copy it on the other. So I know I need something on this side. I'm trying to decide, do I want it on in here or, yeah, I think I do. I think I want it in here. When I say in here, the inside of the flap, or you could put it on the outside too. And then I want it to hold this to this, but ultimately I want it to go all the way down to the bottom. So I think I'm going to put my other magnet right here. So let's see if I can get this figured out, or if it'll go through this many pieces of paper even. There it is. Okay, so that puts it, okay, New thought process. I think I'm going to place the magnet here first. Man, it doesn't, there it goes, okay. I was like, that doesn't want to grab it at all. Okay, I think I'm gonna put it here, and I think it needs to be over at least that far to grab this page, yeah. Okay, we're gonna try this. Okay, it looks like that's going to hold, so is that working? Turn it this way. Tuck everything in. Press, and yes. Okay, it looks like that will work. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So let's see how far in I went. Oh, it looks like about 3 inches. Oops. Okay, got everything tucked in. Both the flaps are closed. So now there is a chance after we get all our designer paper on that it's going to be too thick for these magnets to adhere through this page, and to get to this, because it'll also be under designer paper. And if that's the case, before I put paper down on this flap, I may decide to add one more magnet, and so you might have a magnet here, here, and here. But if I can get away with just 2 magnets for these 2 pages, that's ideal. So we're going to leave it as is, and just knowing that we might need to add a magnet. Okay, page 6. Now we're starting the process of duplication. So we've already done these pages once, like we did on page 4 and 5, and now we're starting to do the same pages. So previously designed, we're just adding them. So this is the top flap, the extended flap, and then the pocket on the bottom. And did I do this? Nope. So these are all going to need to be shortened real quickly. And I'll do that right now by 1/2 inch, so there's no interference with the hinge. So when I'm done, these will be 7.5 by 5 3/4 is one of them. And the other one is going to be 7.5 by 5. 7.5 by 5, 7.5 by 5 3/4. The larger one is going to be the top flap, and the smaller is going to be the extension on the top flap. So let's go ahead and get that started. So the top 5 3/4 by 8, scored at 1/2 inch by 5 along the 5 3/4 inch side. So that's going to go toward the top. Not a pick tool. This is, and I'm going to use my contrast paper. I'm going to bring this. As you guys know, I can't do this unless I flip it around because I got to see all 3 sides. Okay, This is going to go down toward the outside edge of the flap and then straight across. So there you are. So there's my top flap. And the other thing you can do, which I didn't even think of until just this moment, is you could have attached these two flaps together before you laid it down. There's some benefit to that. I think it's kind of pros and cons. This way, if you do it once it's in the book, you can verify that it's actually lining up with the outside edge. If you do them before you put it in the book, then you can make sure they're straight down, but then there's always a chance that they slightly go off the page or into the hinge. So it's kind of a catch as catch can. And the bigger your book, the more bevel you have as you're working with it. So it's just something to think about. You can actually do it either way. So this flap is going to get adhered to the very edge of this flap, and it is 5 by 7.5. And you're going to score a 1/2 inch along the 5-inch side, and it's going to get adhered right to the bottom of this. And our goal is to have it go straight here. Your eye will be drawn to the edge of the paper, so you want this to be as flush as possible. So I'm going to lay down this corner first. And then I'm going to bring it across. And then I'll take my fingers out and press it down. Okay, so it is very straight to the edge, very flush along the edge. That's what you want to see, as much as you can get that to happen. And then it's going to flip and flip. And then the last piece is a pocket. And I need to shorten this real quick and add a new score line. So we're going to take a 1/2 inch off. I'll do it this way, and then I'm going to move my score line over a 1/2 inch. Is that right? Yep. It's going to be 8. And a 1/2. Is that right? 8 and a 1/2. Yeah. Sorry. Just trying to keep it flat. Since I've already got score lines in it, wants to bubble up on me. Okay. Now add a score line, and we can get it into here. And I'm gonna miter that edge real quick, provided I can find my scissors. So I've got 2 of the sides with tape. I'll add a little tape here. And then page 6 is just about done. Let's see. There we go. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. Like I said, I'm excited about this new collection, and I'm very excited to see what Christine does. I know you guys really love her designs. We always get so much good feedback, and she really appreciates it, and so do we. So the next collection I think that we have out is the DCE, the Gentleman DCE, so we'll be doing something on that fairly soon. Okay, I'm going to get this in. I'm just wanting to marry the edge of the pocket up to the edge of this page. Get my contrast paper in here. Beautiful. But all my edges line up just like they should. Okay, now I gotta go back to page 2 because I can't remember. No, we didn't. Actually, it's page 3. Yes, we did. Okay, we did put a magnet in. I had to go back and look at that. So I'm going to place it on the bottom first so it's not too close to the edge of the pocket. And look at that, there's already a magnet on the other side, so it naturally wants to find it. And that's fine. It doesn't have to be centered. And then we want, let go of me. There we go. All right, did it line up? Yes, it did. Okay, that is the end of page 6. We're on to page 7. Page 7, let's see, did I already shorten these? Looks like I did. Okay, there we go. To try to remember how I did it. Here we go. Okay. So, it looks like we're going to start with one large flap, and this is 8 by 10. 8 by 10. It's going to be the mirror image of its mate, and it is going to get attached to the right hand side of the pocket page. Okay, I'm going to shift this. Okay, just lining up the corner, and then I want my page nice and flush, if I can get that. Not quite. No, I'm not sure you guys can see me. I'm going to double check. Yeah, I can. Okay, I just put down a contrast page because I was having difficulty distinguishing the edge of the pocket page from the cover. It all starts to look the same. Okay, beautiful. Okay, that's in. So we have a large pocket, 8 by 10, score 1/2 inch along the 8-inch side. And then we have a left and right flap that's going to be adhered. I have to go back and look somewhere. Oh, adhered to this. So this is going to get attached to this flap. This flap will get attached here. And you know what? I think I'm going to do this I'm going to construct this a little bit differently. I'm going to attach the left and right flap to this and then attach this to the large flap. So I'm going to dry fit this because remember, one has to close over the other and still fit on this page. So I'm going to dry fit it and figure out which one I'm going to trim down a little bit, if I haven't already. I may have already done it. It looks pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this down. So for these flaps, they are lining up with the corner and the bottom. That's one, and then the other one's going to go this way. Let's make sure when we close it, it will close and be flush. And it looks like it is. So I think I must have trimmed one of these down a little bit prior and not recalled. The other thing that's nice about doing this outside of the book is if you go to close it and one of these is too long, it's very easy to trim if it's outside the book. It's in the book, it's still possible, it's just a little harder. there so it's easier to see. Perfect. Perfect. It is in. It's done. And it closes. So that's awesome. That is awesome, and we are done with that. Okay, so now this top flap, so it's left and right. I want to close this way because I really want this edge to be toward the spine. Now I'm going to apply this directly to the top. So I'm going to go over those measurements because I'm not sure I did that while we were walking through. This is 7.5 by 7.5, and you're going to score 1/2 inch along one of the sides. These two flaps are 5.5 by 8, 5.5 by 8, and you're going to score 1/2 inch along the 8-inch side. So when you're finished, you'll have a 7.5 by 5.5 flap. And then it is going to get attached to the right-hand corner of the pocket page, and it'll be actually attached to this flap. So I'm going to rotate this around so I can see these 3 sides as I apply it. And I'm going to have to remember to turn this over too. And then I'm going to tuck in a contrast sheet so I can see these 2 edges. And I'm looking to lay that down nice and straight. And I'll get my tool. And then there's one more feature on this page, and it's a pocket toward the bottom. There we go. That is in. Okay. Back around to the right side. So I'm going to walk through that again real quick. So you have 2 5.5 by 8s scored at 1/2 inch on the 8-inch side, 7 by 7 scored 1/2 inch on any of the sides since it's a square, and it opens up and it's attached to an 8 by 10 flap, and you're going to score 1/2 inch along the 8-inch side. Okay, so all of this looks really good. Although when I open it, I see I've got a little bit of a tag here. So when I'm going back and doing my detail work, I'll remove that tag, because when it closes, it's still flush with the page. It's just that little tag is sticking out. So overall, I'm very happy with how the page has come along. And then there's one more piece, and it is the pocket. And it's going to get applied right here. And again, I think what I'm going to do is have an insert, I have actually upside down, have an insert that goes here that'll hold these flaps down. But when we get to the designer page, if I decide I'm not happy with that, or things don't slip in and out of this pocket easy enough, then I may decide to add a magnet here, and just to hold the flap down, and then have whatever's in the pocket just inside this flap. And I didn't do this on the first page, but we're going to leave a little tab on either side so that we can slip the designer page down. I forgot to do that on the first one. So I am probably going to go back while the tape is still new and lift those 2 corners and put something under it so it's easy to maneuver later when I'm ready to do the designer paper and slide it underneath the pocket. Okay. So try to remember to leave your 2 tabs on your pockets. It's not the end of the world if you don't, but it is nice to be able to tuck your designer paper slightly behind your pocket. Okay. And I'm lining up this edge and the bottom of the page. Okay, and there we are. There's our pocket. Looks beautiful. Okay, so again, I'm not sure if I'm going to use whatever's in the pocket to secure these flaps or add a magnet later, but for now I'm planning on doing this. But if it gets too bulky once I add the designer papers, we might have to rethink that. So for now, no magnet, but be prepared, we may come back and add that. Okay, that is the end of page 7. And so page 8 is really simple, because we're going to do that pop flip mechanism that I did in my last album, but we're not going to construct that until we get the designer paper down. So that'll be on the bottom half. The top half is just 2 simple flaps, a left and a right. And they are going to be moving. One of them is going to be, let me double check, make sure I didn't shorten these. I don't think I did. I think I left them the full length. Yeah. So it's going to be just like this, which is page 1. So page 1 and page 8 are the same. I'm going to adhere one toward the spine and one toward the edge of the page. It does look like I shortened it. Did I? I did. So I'm going to knock looks like a 1/2 inch off this, but let me double check with my ruler. Yeah, okay. So these need to be 4 by 8, 4 by 8. So I'm going to shorten these by 1/2 inch, 4 by 8. I'm going to score a 1/2 inch. Score 1/2 inch along the 8 inch side. So the finished will be 4 by 7.5. And that way we don't have to worry about them getting stuck on each other. Okay, so this is going to, I'm going to actually apply this one first. From the spine to the outside of the page. I'm going to use my contrast piece of paper here. And we're almost done with this page.